I'm David Frangioni, and welcome to a webinar series, the first of which we're going to talk about recording studios and kind of high level, all things about recording studios, and very specifically, because context is everything, professional recording studios. So that's the key context, because there's a lot of different types of studios, and there are a lot of levels and expectations that go within those different types. So we're going to look at high level how recording studios have evolved over the years from analog to digital. And we're going to talk about what is a professional recording studio, and then, of course, answer questions. So let's just talk about kind of the history of professional recording studios from the storage means perspective. Now, what does that sound like? That doesn't sound very like music and recording like, but it actually is, because how are your recordings, right? One of the key needs in a studio is to record music or any kind of audio. And so within that studio, what are you recording it to? So for years, it was analog tape. And then within that, you hear 2-track, 8-track, 16-track. What that means is how many simultaneous unique tracks can be recorded either at the same time or individually. And of course, the track count and the amount of tracks that can be recorded has evolved and has grown over the years. So you had, 2 tracks, then it went to 8, or actually to 4, then to 8, 16, 24, 32, 48. And within that, you had analog tape. The capacity that it kind of maxed out at was 24 tracks. That's what we had up until the 80s. We had 24 tracks of analog tape, and you could take the tape deck that played the reel-to-reel 24 track, and you could synchronize multiple tape decks so that you could have more than 24. Typically, it was 48. It was 2 tape decks synchronized together if you needed more than 24, and a lot of artists did and still do. Then digital came along, and it introduced 32 tracks onto one single reel of digital tape. And then that evolved to 48 tracks onto one reel of digital tape. And then we moved from tape altogether to hard disk, which is what virtually all recording is done to today. So we had analog, multi-track, 2, 4, 8, 16, 24, and then sometimes machine synchronized together to exceed the 24-track analog medium. Then we went to 32-track and 48-track digital tape, and now we're in hard disk recording. And the amount of tracks you can record to hard disk has far exceeded anything we could ever do on tape. And it's literally in the hundreds or even easily over 1,000 tracks that we can have recorded to hard disk digitally. So that's the evolution of the medium that the music, the audio, was stored on. It's very significant to understand that, because it gives you the understanding of what, if any, the limits are today that you can record and play back from. But it also gives you the language to understand if somebody had a recording from the 60s, 70s, 80s, etc., and they were talking to you and saying, oh, I have that on, my 2-inch 24 track. Now you have context to that. Oh, I see. Oh, they recorded on analog multi-track. And what happens with all those recordings, because as you can imagine, there's, hundreds of thousands of recordings that were done to tape, either analog or digital. Those are transferred to hard disk nowadays. And then from there, all the work occurs from hard disk. So all legacy recordings are now transferred, and we work in the current medium, which is digital hard disk. So that's the storage medium. Now let's talk about what a professional recording studio is. Okay, so when someone says I'm going into the studio, or I want to build a professional studio, what do they mean? So let's talk about the characteristics and the categories that go into that. And again, we'll stay high level. So the first thing is you have to have at least one space, of course, and it has to be isolated. All right. So to record and or play back in a proper professional recording studio space, you need isolation. And what does that mean? It means that outside noise doesn't come in, and to a great extent, inside noise doesn't go out. But what we're really most concerned with is outside noise coming in or any noise being introduced into the space. What do I mean by that? Air conditioning that's too loud, that will interfere. And that's something we have to control in a professional recording studio to get our isolated recording and or playback space. Of course, you need at least one room. A lot of studios have two or more. So why? Well, in its most basic configuration, you have what's called a control room, where you see the console and the speakers that play back and a volume control, faders to mix and to adjust whatever's being played back or recorded. That's the control room. That's where playback occurs, okay? Meaning that everything that's recorded is played back in the control room or has been recorded in the past. Somebody sends you something to listen to. That's the control room. That's really mission control. That's command central, the control room. And it's really part of every professional recording studio. What then graduates to the next room is a dedicated, isolated recording space. Okay. And that recording space, you do drums, a full band, overdubs, vocals. So that recording space could be small enough to be a vocal booth and some percussion overdubs and guitars and just a relatively small space. And it could be large enough to house an entire band or a large drum kit or acoustic piano, etc. All depends on the needs of the studio and how it was built. So you have control room, recording spaces, at least one extra in a lot of professional recording studios. And within that control room, this is another very important component of a professional recording studio, is you have accurate monitoring. Meaning, when we say monitors nowadays, people think video screens, but monitoring is for audio. It's monitoring what's playing back. Okay, so in its most basic form, it's stereo, it's two speakers, and you're listening back and you're hearing things in the room that you may have never heard before, even if you've listened to the source material many times in the past. And the reason is because the room is so accurate that it's playing back exactly what's been recorded, okay, or is being recorded. So precise, accurate monitoring of sound, crucial for professional recording studio. The inspired environment. What's the vibe inside that studio, inside the control room? Does it inspire you to create? In the past, when you look at studios in the 60s and 70s, they were very clinical looking. You went in and the vibe was just like very kind of almost cold a little bit. No ambient light in most cases. So they're dark spaces, and the lighting inside the room is the only vibe lighting. So it just had a certain energy to it. And as the years have gone on and the studios have evolved, people's perspectives, our understanding of acoustics and different things that we can do within the room to make them better, and use natural light as well, because glass was always, they always said, well, glass is the enemy of great playback. To some extent, that's true, but now we found ways to integrate glass, which allows the natural light to come in and still have a great environment. So an inspired environment is very, very important. And of course, the equipment, right? So a lot of times nowadays, when you're not talking about a professional recording studio, all most people are talking about is just equipment. Oh, I've got recording equipment, so now that's my studio room, which is great. You know, that's evolved the home studio from a few hundred people to millions. So that's a great thing for making music, for creators, and for the studio world at large. So let's recap. What makes for a professional recording studio? isolated spaces, one minimum control room, plus some recording rooms if needed or in space allows, accurate monitoring, an inspired environment, and proper studio equipment. Okay, so pro level equipment. A lot of people call a recording studio just having some panels on the wall and some equipment. So that's fine. That is a recording studio in a certain context, but it's not a professional recording studio. So that's what we're referring to. So we have our terminology consistent and accurate. So now we have a professional recording studio. It's built. All of these characteristics have been integrated into it. And now what can we do in that studio? I mean, it seems obvious. You can record, you can play back, you can edit, you can mix. But what's really, really crucial to what you can do is, in many cases, if the room is right, it's the equipment. Like, what's the limitation, if any, to the equipment? And people always ask me, like, in my experience, how do you become really efficient, if not even fast, at working in the professional studio? And it kind of goes hand in glove with the equipment, which is why I'm talking about these two things in the same point that I'm making, is that when you're looking at the equipment you're going to choose, you really want to look at, well, what are the industry standards, right? I have a professional studio. It means that my files and what I'm working on here or others are working on all have to be interchangeable. So you have to be aware of, well, what I call best practices and industry standard. So what are the industry standards? Well, there are a few of them in terms of like what the most installed user bases are for different technologies. Of course, nowadays, the being a digital hard disk recording medium that everyone's working on, there are a few choices, but this industry standard is generally considered Avid Pro Tools. That's what people consider. That's what virtually everyone has when you're talking about a DAW. You hear the word DAW all the time, digital audio workstation. It means that it's a software and or software hardware solution that records, edits, mixes audio inside of one environment. It's called the digital audio workstation. And Pro Tools by Avid is the number one digital audio workstation. So you want to have Pro Tools, even if it's not how you work all the time. You want to have it available in your studio, and you want to learn how to use at least the basics. It actually is offered in different tiers. Pro Tools is. So you can have like a free version, Pro Tools Intro, and it has very limited functionality, but you can kind of learn the software because within it, a lot of the concepts are the same, even on the most basic version. And then they open up more features as you go all the way up to Pro Tools Ultimate, which you can add hardware accelerator digital signal processing DSP cards to Ultimate that reside in a Mac or PC computer and PCIe card slots, and that actually processes audio, so you're not just using the computer's processor and whatever it has for CPU power, but you actually have dedicated what they call DSP power. And that's in Pro Tools lingo. It's referred to as Pro Tools HDX. So Pro Tools Ultimate is the software. Pro Tools HDX is the hardware. And when those two combine, you have the ultimate Pro Tools system, and most pro studios have that. And of course, HDX can be expanded from one card to two cards to three cards. And every card provides more processing. So you can have more tracks with more what they call plugins, which are audio effects. And that gives you your system capability. Now, when we talk about plugins and audio effects, that brings us to the category we talked about when we said, what is a professional studio? We talked about professional studio equipment. Well, prior to the computer age that we're in now, where everything is done in a computer, you have what was called outboard gear. And outboard gear would be the effects that you would use in a recording studio, and And every piece of equipment you see in a rack is a piece of outboard gear. Now, we still have outboard gear today, and we always will have outboard gear because you need to take microphones and guitars, line level, and different types of signals, and you need to bring them into the hard disk workstation, and that's done through mic pre's, compressors, equalizers, etc. And you have at that point then your outboard gear. So in the past, that's all we had. If you wanted to put a reverb effect on a vocal, a delay, somebody says, hello, 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 hello. And that's all done via effects. And in the past, it was only outboard gears. You see these big racks of equipment when you look at studios, especially in the 70s and 80s, you see this massive amount of equipment. That's what it is. It's outboard gear. Now, a lot of that outboard gear has been converted and modeled into plugins. So you can take this big, expensive piece of outboard gear, and now you can just select it as a plugin. Well, not only does that give you the space savings, and in many cases, if not all cases, a great cost savings, but it allows you to recall your settings very, very quickly, which in a pro studio is a big deal. So in the past, you can imagine if you had outboard gear everywhere, then you would have to write down the settings. And so you could call it back up if you wanted to work on that song again a week later, and you had all these other projects going between the day you worked on it and the next time you worked on it. Well, all your settings will have changed because they're outboard, they're physical pieces of equipment. So now with a plugin, all the settings are saved in every single session. So it's just really fast to work. So what that means for all of us is we want to establish workflows. When I'm asked, how do you work very, very quickly and efficiently? The answer is I create workflows. And so it starts with what equipment do I want and do I need? And that's where in a pro studio, you make those decisions. And then I call them the tools in the toolbox, because that's what all this equipment is. They're tools to be able to go and work on music and audio as efficiently and effectively and quickly as possible. So the tools in the toolbox consist of whatever works for you. There's thousands and thousands of choices, and within that, millions of configurations. But once you decide and make those choices and you learn them, that is a big part of how you're going to create your workflow. And workflow means as a project is going along, how are you responding to it with these tools? Because every audio signal, every singer, every drum performance, everything's different every song. And even within a song, it changes. So you've got infinite configurations that are going to be possible. And what you need to do is create workflows that attend to them and speed up the process as much as possible. There's no one size fits all, but there are workflows that fit all. And so what I do for that is I create templates and presets, and I create my own best practices settings so I can have starting points of what I do the most often and then adjust from there. So things that you find yourself always doing, they're not going to sound the same, and the settings are not going to be the same, but the configuration. Oh, I always like when I record drums, I want, these mic pre's with these EQs and these compressors, and then I'll adjust all of those things based on the drummer and the drum set, et cetera, et cetera. But I know that that's kind of my go-to. So maybe it's not every time, but it's enough times that you want to template it. And that helps you really speed up workflow. So those are very, very key things. Now, I want to pause for a second and see, does anybody have any questions? And there's a Q&A button. And anything that for questions, comments, I'm here to share my experiences and what I've learned in decades of being in recording studios, building hundreds of them literally, and working with great artists. And I want to share what I've learned and help you kind of take what you're doing to the next level and or just simply clarify things. So we're talking about recording studios, we're talking about workflows, we're talking about digital audio workstations. So let's talk about something that is really important in a pro studio, and you're going to find it in every pro studio, and that is the analog to digital converters. Okay, now that sounds like such a geeky technical thing. Like, what the heck does anybody care about that? And what did I just say? Well, what I said was that an analog to digital converter is used whenever you're recording anything, especially anything live, because the medium is digital, the hard disk recording, but the source is analog, us, humans, instruments, anything played live. So you've got to convert that signal from analog to digital. Now, this is done behind the scenes. This is on every computer in the last, 25 years, 30 years. This is everywhere. There's analog to digital and digital to analog, D to A. Those two stages in the process, analog to digital being the recording stage and digital to analog being the playback stage, those are very, very crucial stages. And there's actually available specialized outboard analog to digital and digital to analog converters that really make a huge difference in the sound. And when you utilize those and you pick them very carefully, you're going to hear a noticeable improvement in sound quality of your recordings and what you're playing back on the digital to analog side. So look for these converters, listen to different converters. There's A to D, there's D to A. There's multiple configurations. You can have 1 or 2 channels of A to D. You could have up to, 16, 24 channels of A to D. It just depends on what your needs are. And the same thing for D to A. Now, when we're talking about D to A, of course, if it's already digital, meaning it's already on the hard disk, it's been recorded, then to hear it, it has to come to analog at some point to get to your ears. So that conversion of D to A, and when we would say, well, why would we need more than 2 channels? Because we're listening in stereo. Well, for stereo, you wouldn't necessarily need more than 2 channels. However, there are now multi-channel playbacks, and specifically Dolby Atmos, right? It's a multi-channel immersive audio format, meaning that we're not just listening in stereo anymore. When you listen to Apple Music and you have AirPod Pros in and you're listening to the spatial audio mix, that's a Dolby Atmos mix that has all kinds of sound moving that is not possible in stereo. And so when you're mixing in the studio, you typically have 7 speakers around you, circularly, we'll call it, just for the sake of discussion. It's a lot of detail that we could go into, but we're just going to keep it very, very high level. You have 7 channels around you. You have at least 4 channels above your head and subwoofers that are dedicated for low frequency effects. So oftentimes it's referred to as 714, 724, 926. It's referring, the 3 numbers are referring to the speakers around you, the speakers above you, and the subwoofers. So now all of a sudden you have 11, 12, 14 channels playing back. You need more DA. So that's where the higher count multi-channel digital to analog converters come in. And so Dolby Atmos in professional recording studios, it's quickly becoming the standard that people are playing back with Dolby Atmos. So, question, what should you watch out for by not purchasing gear that would become quickly obsolete, not having enough channels of storage space for your future recording? It's a great question. And basically, what it means is that, what do you do to not buy something today that's obsolete tomorrow? Because a lot of this equipment can be expensive. And the answer, there is a solution to that. And the solution is you buy equipment that is going to last as forever as possible, meaning that you buy the better equipment. In almost every case, the higher end pieces of equipment you have for your entire life. A lot of what I have in my studio for outboard gear is equipment that I've had for over 20 to 25 years. I mean, think about that in technology terms. If you had a cell phone and you had it for 5 years, most people would say, oh, that's a long time to have your cell phone. Well, in the studio world, it's the same kind of thing in terms of technology. It's moving very rapidly, and features are being added, and new techniques are being discovered, sound quality is being improved, etc. So how do you not buy something that's obsolete? And the solution is get really pro advice, do your homework, but buy the better equipment. The reason the pieces I have are literally decades old in my outboard gear. And I have newer stuff, of course, as well, but that newer equipment I will have probably forever. It's not going to get outdated because if you have a great sounding mic pre, meaning your microphone plugs into this device called a mic pre, and then the output of it goes into your hard disk recording system. If it sounds great today, it's going to sound great always. When you buy the less expensive items or the more trendy items, you'll spend a little less today, but they will quickly get outdated because the sound quality is, as you get better and your projects get better, you'll just say, oh, I can't, this is not going to work anymore. This does not suit my needs. And it will be outdated. Same thing with digital types of equipment. Well, digital goes outdated much faster than you can imagine analog. But when you buy the better equipment and you buy equipment in the digital realm that can be externally clocked. So what does that mean? It means that every digital device uses a clock, and the clock is how it keeps its samples in place. You don't hear clicks or other problems, and it determines the quality of the playback is how well that clock is resolved, how much jitter it has, or how high quality the crystal is in the clock. So what happens is you can buy what's called a word clock generator. And that question leads perfectly into this because they all kind of go hand in hand. It's a word clock generator is a master clock that feeds all of your digital devices, provided they have some ability to take word clock in, which most of like what I'll call the medium level and up and all pro gear will have this word clock in. And what happens is that you buy a word clock generator that's really high quality, you send it to the word clock in on all these devices, and they're using that master word clock generator as their clock. So if you want to upgrade your word clock generator later, you've just upgraded, say you have 6 pieces of equipment all being clocked to the master word clock generator, you've just upgraded the clock on 6 pieces of equipment with one purchase of a word clock generator if you want to upgrade that. Or you buy a really nice one, they last for years. And again, that's the key to not being caught with, I bought something and now it really isn't going to suit my needs. Go higher. Question, have older recordings pretty much been converted to Dolby Atmos? Great question. And the answer is they're being converted. So there's still a ton of old recordings, legacy recordings that have not been converted to Atmos yet. And it's a heavy lift, as you would imagine. It's really, to do it right, it's a manual process, meaning you have to remix it again. You can do like a cheat conversion where you can send the stereo mix that exists from the original recording and you can up convert it to all of the speakers we talked about, but it really doesn't sound that great. Apple will not approve the mix if you do that. If it can catch it, if the algorithm at Apple can catch that, and most of the time it can, it will kick the mix back. So they don't actually allow and approve up converted mixes at Apple. So you really have to do it from scratch and do it right, but still a long way to go to get the mixes. I mixed with Charles Dye the first Kiss album into Atmos, the 50th anniversary, which came out on the 50th anniversary of it, which was February of 24. And you can hear, we mixed that fresh into Atmos. You can hear it on Spatial Audio and Apple Music, and you kind of go between the original and the new mix, and it's just night and day and just incredible. And Atmos, I'm a huge fan of Atmos. I love mixing Atmos, and I love working in my own Atmos studio and building Atmos studios for others. How do you keep up with software changes? That is such a great question because that is something that is still a work in progress for so many of the software companies. I'll tell you, if somebody, and no pun intended, I'll say crack the code, but if someone can crack the code on how to go and look at every plugin that's in the plugins folder in someone's system and automatically determine if it needs to be updated, that's a huge product, and that's really missing. You have to manually go right now and check the manufacturers. Now, that in and of itself is a super heavy lift. I have thousands of plugins, so you can imagine how much time that takes when I want to check to see, I can't do them all in one shot. It would take a week straight, and all I would be doing was updates, which makes no sense. But I do it in batches, and the worst part of it is that when you go to a manufacturer's website, there are still a great deal of them that don't indicate on their site when the last time the plugin was updated. So it just says, here's the download for the plugin. You don't know if it's the one you already have or if it's a newer one. So that's frustrating as well. The industry really desperately, I'll even say, that it needs to conform to one methodology of how software is brought to the consumer in terms of versioning, because it's all over the map. Everybody does it differently. So answer to the question is I do it manually, and I love the manufacturers like Waves, that, Fab Filter, these companies that soft tube, they make it very straightforward. You launch their central plugin updater app, and it just automatically tells you at that point what needs to be updated. So once you launch it, it's a piece of cake and it's very well done. So some of these manufacturers really have it down, and others you have to go to a website and then you have to just download it and see if it's the same version. And those are the guys, and that's the vast majority of them, unfortunately. Those are the guys that have to get it together and make this more efficient for us. When I work as a combined recording engineer and producer, and I'm mixing the final track, how can you tell when the track is done? Well, that's something you learn over the years, to not overproduce. Try to take a step back. Try to take the opinion of others. Believe it or not, taking a little time off, which I never was a fan of and never really understood the power of until I got older and wiser and realized, wait a second, that wasn't even really time off from the project, in the sense that it benefited the project as much as sitting there grinding away. Because when you take that space from working on it and having your head in it and listening and being so close to it, and then taking a step back and coming into it fresh or more fresh, you hear things and have perspectives that have evolved, that are better. So I think that's really important. I think you got to work with collaborators that you trust, and you kind of, you listen and have a vision. That's another thing. When I start the track, because the question is like, you're working on the song from beginning to end, how do you keep perspective on it? How do you know when to say it's done? Well, believe it or not, before I'm even working on the track, I have a vision. I want it to sound like this. I want it to be this, have this kind of energy and this kind of vibe and these parts. And when you achieve that, that's when you know it's done. And you've got to trust your gut. You've got to trust your vision. You've got to be committed to, this is the vision of the song. And, yeah, we might have 10 new cool parts that we think of after or right when we think we got it, but you have to know when to stop as well, because it's all about the emotion. This music is emotions. How do people feel when they listen to it? And when you capture that and you get lightning in a bottle, which is the goal on every single piece of music that I'm ever involved in, is I want that emotion to be as strong and powerful as possible. Whatever it is, could be a love song, could be a party song, it could be a sad song, whatever it is, I want that emotion to really, really shine through and connect with the listener. And so that's why it's so important to know when you've got it, and then that's it. What is my go-to outboard preamp? And do I think the plug-in version is just as good? So a preamp, it's a great question. A preamp is um, something that is always, I'll say, well, it's outboard or it's built into an interface. I found in most cases the outboards are better. I love the Massenburg GML mic pre for certain things. I love Neve mic pre's and Focusrite mic pre's. Those are my three go-tos. Those are my favorites. They all have different characteristics. If I had to have one, I would probably pick the Focusrite because I like mic pre's to be as full-bodied and transparent as possible. I don't want the mic pre in most cases to color the sound a lot. And the Focusrites do a great job. They still have character, but they really do a great job of just getting the source to the medium without really interfering with it much. And that's most of the time what I prefer. So Focusrite, the blue series, the ISA, or the red series, those are the ones, the blue's the best to me, some of the best ever. And again, you buy an ISA Focusrite, you're going to have it forever. So it's a great investment. What do I think musicians recording for the first time should look for in a professional studio? Um, I think that they should look for a studio that you got to ask questions ahead of time and look for a studio that really suits your needs in terms of when you go into work. So let's say you're a drummer and you have, a six-piece drum kit. You want to know ahead of time. You want to listen to some things that studio's done. How do the drums sound? Has anybody recorded drums here? Oh, they have. Okay, great. Let me just hear a couple of projects. Now, granted, the people that were on it and a lot of other things are going to influence the sound, so you're not going to get the same sound specifically, nor would you necessarily want to, but you'll know that they're capable of getting a great sound. If somebody got it, that means you can get it. So you'll want to do a little bit of homework on that. You'll want to look at the vibe of the studio. Is it a place you want to spend time in creatively? Does it suit your energy? Do they have the right people there if you're not bringing your own team, your own engineers, producers, etc.? Do they have enough space in the control room or the live room or both for the group that you'll be bringing in? Sometimes if you're working alone, let's say you're a drummer doing a drum solo project, well, you may not want giant rooms because they can feel overwhelming and just like not natural. Sometimes you want smaller spaces in that situation, or other times you don't. So you want to really kind of make a list of the things that are important to your needs and your project. Listen to what that studio's done before and meet the person with whom you'll be working ahead of time to make sure this is the person that you want to get in the boat with and start sailing, because you don't want to make changes to personnel in a project if you can help it. So that the homework will help you kind of solve that ahead of time so you get the right team. So Anthony asks, as a musician with a home recording studio, what kind of advice can I give to learn more about developing one's recording skills? So I'm a big believer in education and I'm a big believer in experiential learning. And I don't think that one without the other is the best way forward. I think you really need both. So the answer to the question, in my opinion, is you want to get experience with people that you respect and admire. Try to learn from them. Spend a half a day in the studio with them, or bring somebody into your studio that you really respect and then watch what they do, or have them help you set up the settings and then record those settings, write them down, take pictures. Like, okay, these are the settings that they had to get that drum sound I wanted or that guitar tone I wanted, and learn from them. Experientially will always be a much more deep level way of learning. However, the educational side of actually taking classes, going to an SAE, a Full Sail, etc., at any level, whether it's full on or whether it's just classes or just going to master classes, Produce Like a Pro, my good friend Warren Hewitt, that's a great resource. I highly recommend you go to Produce Like a Pro. There's so much really quality educational content there that you can really learn And then when you're learning these things and you're learning from someone who's done it and they're giving you advice, you're reading about it, and then you go and you apply it, that's when it really clicks and you learn the most and it lasts a long time and it stays with you. So great question though. Guys, these are all incredible questions. I just want to tell you what an honor and privilege it is to have spent this time with you today, talk about recording studios, talk about recording. I hope it wasn't too geek speak. I really wanted to keep it high level and everyone here had great questions. I'm David Frangioni. And hit me up on LinkedIn if you have further questions, if I can help in any way. And thank you for being here today. Recording Studios webinar. We'll see you again soon.